Last time, we broke down the 4 levels of Primarchs, looking at how they evolve across the setting of Warhammer 40K. But out of all these degenerate space babies, none of them evolve quite like Fulgrim. That's the thing, with Fulgrim, he doesn't just change once, he does over and over and over again. As across the timeline of 40K, Fulgrim goes through 5 distinct forms, evolutions, levels, or whatever you want to call them, that fundamentally change who he is, his abilities, and of course, his power. From the bestest boy at the height of the Great Crusade, to something that looks like it does way too much ketamine. So in today's video, we're breaking down every stage of his evolution, how he changes, what he gains, and how each level pushes him closer to becoming one of the most powerful beings in the entire setting. And with that intro, welcome to Fulgrim Week. Yes, you heard that right. This week is purely dedicated to the Primarch of the Emperor's Children, Fulgrim. Starting today, I'll be dropping 3 videos this week as we get closer and closer to Fulgrim's favorite day, 420. So to all you Fulgrim fans out there, this week is for you guys. So let's jump straight into the cowhole. It's time to break down the 5 levels of Fulgrim. Our first level is Base Fulgrim, when he was just a simple wee lad Primarch. For those asking, what the hell is a Base Primarch? Well, I'll tell you. The Base Primarchs are quite simply the default versions of these demigods, before any major amps, enhancements, or transformations take place. Think of them as the Primarchs during the peak of the Great Crusade and into the beginning of the Horus Heresy. They are still incredibly strong, able to lift tons, move faster than even Space Marines can track, and tank heinous wounds and be fine. As well as the added addition that they can also project that iconic Primarch aura, compelling those around them, even Space Marines, to kneel, obey, or even stand in awe of their presence. In Fulgrim's case, he is all the standard Primarch traits, with a few standout differences from his brothers. In his base form, he seems to be an incredible duelist, and quite possibly one of the best among the Primarchs. Multiple of his brothers state this. For example, Perturabo in Angel's Exterminatus states, Fulgrim spun and leapt like a dancer. Yet Perturabo saw the fierce skill in his every move, the lethal grace that had his brother a matchless swordsman, beyond even the technical ability of Guilliman or the enraged purity of Angron. Lorgar states the same in First Heretic. I will never possess the skill with a blade shown by Fulgrim or the Khan. And finally, Sanguinius even wonders in Scars who would win in a duel between Fulgrim and the Khan. I wonder which one of you would win in a duel, the angel mused. I would like to see that. You both handle a blade like gods. Which is high praise coming from Sanguinius, who you know drew with curs in a bathrobe, and straight up banished Daemon Primarch Angron in the book Echoes of Eternity. We even have 2 statements from Horus Heresy Book 9 Crusade that also elaborates that Fulgrim may be as great or even greater than the Lion as a duelist. So Fulgrim in his base state might be one of the strongest duelists by all accounts. And make sure to keep this in mind, folks, because he'll carry this skill across the remaining 4 levels. Base Fulgrim also seems to be one of the fastest Primarchs. As in the book Fulgrim, the Palatine Phoenix, it stated, the armor she knew was designed so as to give free rein to his inhuman ability. Sensible, given that he was the fastest of the Emperor's sons by all accounts. Capable of movement that the human eye simply could not track. This was also before the Khan was even discovered, so Fulgrim is most likely a top 3 Primarch in terms of speed, with him, the Khan, and the Lion. Because, as you all remember in my pushing the Lionel Johnson agenda video, the Lion was able to blitz Conrad Kurz, a Primarch who can literally see the future. I will most likely have to cover who is the fastest Primarch at some point in time, but since I don't want to get too sidetracked in this video, I'm not going to make a judgment on that at this time. Honestly, let me know down in the comments who you think the fastest Primarch is. I would love to see what you guys think. But unlike his speed or dueling ability, Base Fulgrim's physical strength and durability is average at best. Although there's nothing that states that he is the physically weakest Primarch, We have this excerpt from his Primarch novel, which states, "We see that Fulgrim was neither the largest of his brothers, nor the most intimidating. He was beautiful and graceful, and those things put the human mind at ease. All but the most wary quickly forgot that he was a Primarch, and not simply exceedingly tall." So even though this excerpt does not outright say that Fulgrim is physically weak, but it does say that he isn't the largest, nor the most intimidating. And since taller people are likely to have more muscle than those that are shorter, and if we look at the height of all the Primarchs, Fulgrim is literally right smack in the middle, which helps support my argument that Fulgrim is probably average amongst the Primarchs in terms of physical strength. This is further backed up by his fight with Ferrus Manus. During the Dropsite Massacre, Fulgrim's physical strength is nothing compared to Ferrus Manus, who is overpowering him when their blades are locked together. So Fulgrim's physical strength is probably around average. As for his durability, I would say exactly the same. We don't really have a ton of feats for base Fulgrim's durability, but we do have some. For example, in Fulgrim the Palatine Phoenix, he's able to no-sell bullets as they do little to no damage to him. He can survive in the vacuum of space for hours, and even minigun fire only causes him to wince. Though I will say most of the Primarchs should be capable of this or more. Now let's also talk about Fulgrim's warp ability. For those who don't know what a Primarch warp ability is, I'll briefly cover it. All of the base Primarchs have warp abilities, each gifted from the Emperor's many aspects, and some are more pronounced than others. For example, Magnus the Red is an incredibly powerful Psyker, so his warp power is obvious. At the same time, others are more hidden, like Rebute Gilliman, whose ability is essentially multitasking at its finest, like managing an entire empire with ease. So what would Fulgrim's base warp ability be? Well, it's kind of hard to directly state what it is. There are a couple of right answers. As we just discussed, at least we know that he has an aura of supernatural beauty, compared to the other Primarchs, which can put humans at ease.
Who is she?
It is also possible that he may have embodied the Emperor's desire for perfection, allowing him to master various things like dueling or blacksmithing, like when he created Forgebreaker, a hammer that even impressed Ferrus Manus. So it's plausible that Fulgrim also has a jack-of-all-trades ability, similar to the Lion or Horus Lupercal. The problem is, this is never explicitly stated in established canon, only from what I've gathered across the 30K novels, so I could be incorrect. There's also the argument to be made that Fulgrim had an enhanced healing ability, but we only ever really see that in his other forms, which of course we're gonna talk about later. Sure, in Fulgrim he heals a broken leg in an hour, but all of the Primarchs have been shown to do something similar. So that is base Fulgrim. He's one of the fastest, one of the most skilled, and it seems his warp ability is perfection in all things, along with his supernatural beauty. But this base state does not last long, because even before the heresy begins, Fulgrim decided to pick up a sword.
No. Wait.
The Laer blade. And after that, Fulgrim went from the best as boy to his next level, Laer Blade Fulgrim. Laer Blade Fulgrim, as the name suggests, is Fulgrim empowered by the insidious nature of the demon-possessed blade. The Blade of the Laer, also known as the Silver Blade of Laer, was a Chaos Demon weapon recovered by Fulgrim in the aftermath of the Imperial Xenocide campaign known as the Cleansing of the Laerian, during the latter days of the Great Crusade. This sword seems to give massive amps to Fulgrim, boosting his strength, durability, and even granting him a form of healing. But before we get into that, let's first discuss how the Laer Blade works. As I mentioned, it has a spooky, scary, evil demon within it. This demon seems to have control over when and who it chooses to empower. But it also has an aura of effect that lures people into wielding it, and is even shown to be able to manipulate those around it to do what it wants. For example, we see this happen throughout the book Fulgrim multiple times, as Fulgrim tries to resist it, but not even he can fully do it. "My lord," said a voice beside him. He turned to see Lord Commander Eidolon holding out his sheathed sword, the silver hilt gleaming in the low light of the bridge. Fulgrim felt the dark, smothering weight of its presence settle upon him, and said, "Eidolon?" "You asked for your sword," said the Lord Commander. Fulgrim could not remember issuing the order, but nodded and resignedly reached out to take the pro-offered weapon. He looped it around his waist as though it was the most natural thing in the world. As he snapped the golden eagle buckle closed, the desire to order the attack faded like morning mist. So the blade can both manipulate Fulgrim, controlling his emotions and decisions, but it also can manipulate those around it, as we see with Idawan, who is convinced to give the sword back to Fulgrim, who has no memory of even asking for it. We see this throughout the book, as the demon blade slowly pushes Fulgrim into joining Horus and betraying the Emperor. I'm not kidding, the Laer blade is so manipulative, Fulgrim even believes that the words it's planting in his brain are his own. Damn, that sword is one sneaky motherfucker. Now let's talk about how the Laer blade buffs Fulgrim. First, as discussed, the demon within the blade seems to control when Fulgrim is empowered. And also it appears that Fulgrim has to be actively touching the sword for the amp to activate. But when it does empower him, his base physical stats like strength, durability, and speed skyrocket. The amethyst stone at the hilt of Fulgrim's sword pulsed with an evil light, bathing Ferrus Manus' face in a leering purple glare. Energy streamed from the blade, and musky smoke billowed around them, deadening sounds and obscuring sight. Fulgrim felt a monstrous presence swell around him, its power and nameless essence more intoxicating and dreadful than anything he could have ever imagined. Diabolical strength flooded his limbs, and he pushed against the power of Ferrus Manus, feeling his brother's surprise at his resistance. With the cry of animal rage, he surged to his feet and hurled Ferrus Manus back, spinning and lashing out with his sword. So Fulgrim, who was previously getting overpowered by Ferrus Manus in a contest of strength, is suddenly able to overpower him once the Laer blade amps him. And remember, Ferrus Manus is one of the physically strongest Primarchs. Now I will say though, before continuing, that Ferrus Manus was thoroughly exhausted at the end of this fight, which is partially why Fulgrim was able to toss him like that. So even though the Laer blade amp is massive, Ferrus Manus probably would have put up more of a fight if he wasn't so exhausted. But strength isn't the only thing amped by the Laer blade. This heavily implies that all of his physical attributes, including speed and durability, are also being enhanced. But that's not the only effect of the Laer blade. It also heals him. Unknown energies coruscated along the notched blade, and down the length of his arms into the meat and bone of his wounded body. Fulgrim was wreathed in purple fire. Crackling arcs of lightning caressed him with a lover's tenderness, seeking out his open wounds and licking them with balefire as they sought entry to his flesh. So the amp not only enhances him, but also actively heals his wounds when the demon chooses to channel its power to him. We also see this again after Fulgrim's fight against the Avatar of Cain, where the sword once again entices him and empowers him. In that last moment, the last vestige of his resistance collapsed, and he slid his fingers around the hilt of the sword. Power flowed through him, and the pain of his wounds vanished as though from the most powerful healing bombs. Fulgrim stood straighter, his momentary weakness forgotten as though a wash of power suffused every atom of his body. So at this level, we pretty much take base Fulgrim and then give him a direct enhancement to all of his physical abilities, like speed, strength, and durability, then also give him a powerful healing factor, like goddamn Wolverine. Yeah, it's pretty cracked. Well, not in the drug sense, but you know what? Maybe for Fulgrim it is.
Huh?
Like, let's slow down for a second and truly take this in. I mean, Fulgrim, with this blade in hand, allows Angron to literally run at him with the force that is stated to have pitched a tank over, and simply smiles and tells Angron to please continue, implying that he could have tanked the blow and may have even low or mid-diffed Angron, like Horus did later in the book Dropside Massacre. He even says as much here. But if Angron raises a hand to me again or threatens what I've created here, if he does either of those things, then I will kill him. Fulgrim's smile slips wider, him and his dogs with him. Man. Side note, before we continue, Angron really never gets any love, guys. He is literally a walking doormat for every Primarch. But this is not the end of Fulgrim's evolution, because after killing Ferrus Manus with this sword, Fulgrim fully gives in, allowing the demon within the blade to possess him. And that leads us to his next evolution, the third level, Possessed Fulgrim. So level 3 Fulgrim is him possessed by the demon of the Laer blade. This occurs at the end of the Istvan 5 massacre after he kills Ferrus Manus. Fulgrim is on the verge of suicide due to his actions, which I will say is kinda valid, as he has just betrayed the Emperor, killed his best friend and brother, and his legion has fallen so far because of his own actions. So he allows the demon of the Laer blade to take over. An end to it all would be a blessed relief. Oblivion, he whispered as he closed his eyes. Do it. End me. The barriers in Fulgrim's mind dropped, and he felt the elation of a creature older than time as it poured into the void in his soul. No sooner had its touch claimed his flesh for its own than he knew he had made the worst mistake of his life. Fulgrim screamed as he fought to keep it out, but it was already too late. His consciousness was crushed into the dark, unused corners of his mind, forever to be a mute witness to the havoc wrought by his body's new master. One moment, Fulgrim was a Primarch, one of the Emperor's children. The next, he was a thing of chaos.
Look, Pim, I know it's our job to help this guy and everything, but I think this guy's a lost cause. He's obviously made up his mind. Why don't we just cut our losses and get out of here?
So the demon takes over Fulgrim, and Fulgrim himself is locked away, trapped within a painting aboard the Pride of the Emperor at the conclusion of the book Fulgrim. Now, you're probably wondering, who the hell is this demon? Because if this demon can take over a Primarch's body like Fulgrim's, it's gotta be some named Slaanesh demon, like Nakari or something else, right? Well, that's the fun part. It is never revealed who this demon actually is. There are some theories that it's some powerful keeper of secrets, but there is no real evidence or sources to confirm who this thing is, which is a classic GW move. We do get this one paragraph from Fulgrim where the demon describes itself. I am indeed what your insufficient language might call a demon. A poor word, but it will have to suffice. I am a humble servant of the Dark Prince, an emissary come to aid you in your little war. So although that literally gives us no information to work with here, we do at least know that the demon of the Laer blade serves the Dark Prince, Slaanesh. But that is unfortunately all we really have to work with here, because we hardly ever see this version of Fulgrim throughout the canon of the Horse Heresy. He does meet with Horus Lupercal after the Dropside Massacre concludes, and Horus immediately realizes something is wrong with Fulgrim. Horus looked into his brother's dark eyes, seeing beyond the arrogance and superiority to what lay within. Darkness filled his brother's core, an ancient darkness that had torn itself from the womb of a dying race with a bloody birth scream. You are not Fulgrim, he breathed, suddenly wary of this intruder in his midst. No, agreed the thing with his brother's face. But then the demon actually acknowledges that Horus could potentially defeat him, and ends up bending the knee to serve the War Master. So how long is Fulgrim possessed for? Well, not long to be honest. Fulgrim takes place around 006 to 007 M31. While the Reflection Cracked, the direct sequel of the book Fulgrim, happens months after the Dropside Massacre has concluded. So pretty much, possessed Fulgrim only lasts for a short period of time during the Horus Heresy.
You're pointless.
So, does this possessed version of Fulgrim, or rather the demon possessing him, have any unique abilities or powers? Well, we don't explicitly know. I sound like a broken record with this level, but it's the truth. This whole form is kind of a giant question mark. We do know that Fulgrim gains new powers in his next form after freeing himself, but it's unclear if this possessed version has access to those same abilities. This is a demon of the warp, which implies it already has some level of innate warp power. However, it's also inhabiting a Primarch body that it has no real experience using, and in my opinion, that could actually make it weaker overall, at least in terms of fully utilizing that body's potential. But again, the jury is still out on that one, since we don't have enough information or evidence to say for sure. So that's possessed Fulgrim, the biggest question mark I've seen in my Go life. But eventually, the bestest boy somehow manages to free himself from the painting and retake his body, which mind you, happens completely off screen.
That is without a doubt the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Which makes me hate GW writers more and more every single day. But whatever, what can you do, fellas, what can you do? Besides, I don't know, building a time machine, going back in time, telling Grant McNeil to rewrite the ending of Fulgrim, and then burning every single copy of Reflection Cracked. So Fulgrim's character arc actually makes sense. Now we arrive at level 4, Post-Poession Fulgrim, where he comes back with quite a few new tricks up his sleeve. This form is first seen in the novella Reflection Cracked, and lasts until Fulgrim's ascension in the book Angels Exterminatus. We learn in the Reflection Cracked, like I said, that somehow Fulgrim regained control of his body off screen and banished the demon into the painting that once contained him, which is some episode 9 level of bullshit.
Well, that's just lazy writing.
Literally, somehow Fulgrim returned type shit. I'm not kidding, the whole book is kind of funny because the Emperor's children don't think Fulgrim actually has his body back. Because he's acting so weird and gross that they decide to capture him and torture him to try to get the demon out. But lo and behold, it's been Fulgrim all along. He's just kinda weird now. Which literally makes no sense because when Fulgrim gave up his body to the demon, he was still Fulgrim on the inside. Sure, he made a lot of bad decisions, but he was being manipulated by a demon. And then he regains control of his body and he still acts like that same demon. Yeah guys, it literally makes no sense. This book kinda sucks and it really messes up Fulgrim's arc. But what can you do? Let me get back on topic before I start ranting or, building a time machine. Now Fulgrim is back in his body and seems to have gained new powers, which are, I'll admit it, quite powerful folks. He doesn't really elaborate on how he gained them, but we do have this passage from Vengeful Spirit that gives us some insight. Fulgrim says the following: "The thing I spoke to in the wake of Istvan, it is gone from you now. You are Fulgrim once again. I've scoured my flesh of the creature's presence." "Good," said Horus. "What I say here is Legion business, and does not concern the things that dwell beyond our world. I cast the warp thing out, but I learned a great many things from it, while our souls were intertwined." "What things?" asked Mortarion. "We have bargained with their masters, made pacts," hissed Fulgrim, pointing a sickle blade talon at Horus. "You have made blood pacts with gods, and oaths to gods should not lightly be broken." This implies that Fulgrim gained these powers from the demon while it was inhabiting his body. It could also just straight up be chaos corruption from Slaanesh, amping him with gifts from the dark gods. Fabius Bile even notes that Fulgrim's body seems to be changing as he nears ascension. "A change in the composition of his blood and flesh," replied Fabius. "It is though his molecular structure has begun to dissolve the bonds linking its constituent parts into a cohesive whole. What could cause such a thing?" Fabius shrugged. "Nothing of this world," he said with a grin of dreadful appetite. "It is quite fascinating, you understand. It is though his form is preparing for some great ascension. A wondrous shredding of redundant form as his flesh is remade into something extraordinary." So after regaining his body, Fulgrim is actively changing as he prepares for his next form. But before we get to the giant snake man, let's first discuss the new abilities and powers Post-Poession Fulgrim has gained. First of all, his physical attributes once again seem to have increased. But this time it is permanent, as opposed to needing a buff from the Laer blade. Fulgrim is now always at this higher level. We see him tank sonic blasts point blank from the Emperor's children while nearly naked. These sonic blasts can rupture flesh, destroy armor, and even destroy the minds of those struck. And Fulgrim tanks multiple of these at once, even taking pleasure from it in his own weird way. The cacophony unleashed a roaring series of blasts from their sonic weapons. Fulgrim shrieked in pleasure as the sound vibrated his flesh and bones with ferocity that should have killed him thrice over. So his durability is obscene, implying the rest of his physical abilities are also massively enhanced. For example, in this form, Fulgrim can casually ragdoll Space Marines with one hand and send them flying dozens of feet with a single kick, shattering both bone and power armor. But that is not it. Fulgrim, of course, has gained psychic abilities as well, which he uses to crush a goddamn titan. Fulgrim stood alone before the war machine, his pistol cast aside and his sword held loosely at his side. The The Titan's autoloaders ratcheted canisters of shells around from its rear hoppers, and the breeches snapped shut on a fresh load. Fulgrim's free hand reached up to the battle engine, as though demanding it halt its march. A shimmering nimbus of misty light gathered around the Phoenician, its substance shot with threads of barely visible lightning. Fulgrim's splayed fingers closed into a fist, and he twisted his grip as though tearing at unseen ropes. After this, Fulgrim squeezes his hand shut, and the Titan explodes.
You're a wizard, Harry.
So, Fulgrim's psychic powers are quite potent as well. But that's still not it. On top of all of this, Fulgrim gains an unnaturally powerful healing ability. Even Perturabo is impressed by this in Angel's Exterminatus. The swelling around Fulgrim's jaw was already fading. Shattered bones in his cheek and nose and jaw were knitting, and the bruises around his eyes were yellowing. Primarchs healed fast, but Perturabo was impressed at the speed with which Fulgrim's body was undoing the damage he had suffered. And this is after Fulgrim got shot in the face, mind you. So, Fulgrim, after freeing himself and entering his post-possession form, has his physical attributes permanently amped, gains full-blown psychic powers that can crush titans, and can heal incredibly fast, like Wolverine levels of regeneration. All of which is just preparation for his next level, where he gets even stronger, which is honestly insane to think about. Because at level 5 is where Fulgrim finally becomes a Daemon Primarch of Slaanesh.
Look how they massacred my boy.
Fulgrim as a Daemon Primarch is his final form, which he achieves during the events of Angel's Exterminatus, when he sacrifices a gem filled with Perturabo's life force to Slaanesh and ascends to demonhood. As a Daemon Primarch, Fulgrim sacrifices his warped soul to Slaanesh for an unnatural increase in warp power and immortality, as all demon princes are no longer made of physical material. If they die, they get sent back to the warp, where they reform to someday return to wreak havoc in the material realm. This means giving up his immortal soul in exchange for a much shorter path to power, gaining immense enhancements at a cost. Fulgrim essentially becomes an avatar of Slaanesh, the Dark Prince. Fulgrim, however, was an unholy blend of Primarch and Demon. In him, the energy of the warp was married to the wisdom of ancient sciences. He was part material god, part immaterium demon lord, and his power was great. So building off the abilities he had in his post-possession form, he is now faster, stronger, more agile, and just better in every single way. For example, when he fights Rebute Gilliman in Dark Imperium, Fulgrim outright blitzes the Ultramarine Primarch. A whip-fast motion flickered to his side. Fulgrim sped through the melee, coming from the left. Gilliman barely had time to raise his sword before Fulgrim crashed into him, snarling incoherently, knocking him backwards. And then quickly after this, Fulgrim overwhelms Gilliman and mortally wounds him, putting him into a coma for almost 10,000 years. This speed is not exclusive to Primarch fights either, as we see Fulgrim in the 10th edition Emperor's Children Codex blitz an entire Ultramarines battery of tanks and artillery and destroy them in the span of 6 heartbeats, killing the Marines guarding them before they can even react. Fulgrim in his Daemon Primarch state also has enhanced healing. After his duel with Rogel Dorn in the book Saturn IX, a fight he arguably throws, well, it's actually not even arguable because Daemon Primarch Fulgrim should have beat the shit out of Rogel Dorn. But regardless if Fulgrim actually lost his fight or if he threw it, he still regenerates from the massive damage done to him by Rogel Dorn. He stared at Dorn, his wounds close, the skin reknitting without a scar. His dangling hand refused, his armor fixed itself and regained its luster. His blood dried up and blew away as dust. So, as you can see here, Fulgrim is able to heal every single wound, including his armor. We don't know if there's a ceiling for how much he can heal, but we can assume that he can heal any wound that isn't instantly fatal. He can also seemingly teleport using the warp. This is also seen in the book Saturn IX. The Phoenician turned and his huge form glided away towards the parapet. He surged off the edge, black rose petals opened in the air, swallowed him, and vanished. I mean, this is straight up flying Raijin in 40K, which should be an extremely powerful tool for literally anyone. But it's not like he truly needs it, as Fulgrim in his Daemon Primarch form is also able to fucking fly. Yes, those wings on his back are not for show. They allow him to soar across the battlefield with inhuman speed. In addition to this, Fulgrim also seems to be able to release a constant aura of musk and poison to those around him, as seen in the 10th edition Emperor's Children Codex. This musk is even deadly to Space Marines, even those wearing rebreathers. And even more insane, this stench is poisonous to Primarchs, as seen in his fight with Rebute Guilliman in the book Dark Imperium. Guilliman staggered upright, gasping. Every breath poured more of Fulgrim's lethal perfume into his lungs. A poison so potent that it taxed his superhuman body. He parried and parried again, but he could land no counterstrike and was forced back up the stairs. So not even a Primarch, Guilliman, is resistant to this poison, which implies that maybe all the base Primarchs would be affected by this lethal poison. But that is still not it. Just like Post-Poession Fulgrim, Daemon Primarch Fulgrim also has psychic abilities. We see him use them in Vengeful Spirit. Before it could fire, the rear wings peeled back from its body. Fulgrim roared and brought his hands together. The gunship imploded, crushed to a mangled ball of twisted flesh and metal. So Fulgrim can casually destroy a gunship with psychic force alone. And later in that same fight, he's able to generate a psychic shield that can block raptor gunfire. It's like, what can this giant evil snake not do? So to summarize, Daemon Primarch Fulgrim is the complete package. He has permanently amped physical stats like speed, durability, and strength. He is also immortal, has insane regeneration, has warp-based teleportation, flight, poison, and powerful psychic abilities. This is Fulgrim at his absolute peak, a fusion of Primarch perfection and warped monstrosity, making him one of the most powerful beings in all of Warhammer 40K. Now before we conclude this video, it would be silly of me not to at least mention Clonegrim, the unofficial 6th form of Fulgrim. This is the perfect clone created by Fabius Bile, currently sitting in Trazyn the Infinite's museum. But I'm not going to cover him here, because the next video is completely dedicated to him and how he scales in 40K. So keep your eyes peeled for that one as we continue Fulgrim Week. But that concludes this video, as we have gone over the full evolution of Fulgrim across Warhammer 40K. From base Fulgrim, the perfection-obsessed duelist at the height of the Great Crusade, to Laer Blade Fulgrim, where temptation and demon influence start boosting him beyond his natural limits, to Possessed Fulgrim, where he completely loses control of his body, to the Laer Blade Demon, to Post-Poession Fulgrim, where he somehow returns even faster, stronger, and far more dangerous than before, and finally, Daemon Primarch Fulgrim, the fully ascended avatar of Slaanesh, standing at the absolute peak of what he has become. Huge shout out to my amazing Patreon and YouTube members: Impossy Paul, Tyler Pick 7, Musty, Keydri, Seth Capizilla, Lag, Cunning Karkle, Caleb White, Dinkleberry, Olmar, Ultrazon 27, and Michael Skipper 7277. You guys are the absolute best, and I hope you have a big glass of milk on me. Stay milked, everyone, and I'll see you in our next video as Fulgrim Week continues in a couple days.